Hey there, Twins fans, and welcome to a special edition of Twins Daily's Off-Season Live. We are excited today to be reacting to some big moves from your Minnesota Twins. Finally, after a slow-moving off-season, the Twins have made their splash, a couple splashes actually here in the past couple days. So we are going to be reacting here, and I guess kind of in real time. The latest move was just announced a couple hours ago. It's 5:45 on Wednesday night, February 3rd. And we're going to talk about the Twins re-signing their DH Nelson Cruz and bringing in relief pitcher Alex Colomé. I am joined here this evening by a couple of Twins Daily writers, Mr. Matthew Taylor, Mr. David Youngs. Matthew, I know you rushed home from work. You got here in time. Looks like you're all settled in. Thank you for joining us, sir. How are you doing?
Doing well. Happy to talk some Twins and some moves after we waited so long.
Yes, slow. Like I said, it's been kind of a glacial pace this offseason, not just for the Twins, but for a lot of teams. So really exciting to see them make a couple moves in rapid succession. David Youngs, how are you doing tonight, sir? Thank you for joining the show on short notice.
Absolutely. It's great to be here, Nick. And like Matthew said, excited to chat about the recent big moves made. And, you know, it's always fun when you can pluck somebody from your division rival. As the Twins recently did. So should be a great night.
That it is. So as I mentioned, the news came down late last night on Tuesday night that the Twins had agreed to a contract with Nelson Cruz, the boomstick. And then just this afternoon on Wednesday, following up very quickly with the news coming out that they are going to be signing Alex Colomé, as David mentioned, former closer for the division rival White Sox. So let's go in chronological order here. We'll talk a little bit first about the Nelson Cruz move. That was sort of the sticking point of this offseason, I think. It's been a slow back and forth with some periods of silence. I know that Dan Hayes of The Athletic, who broke the news and has really been on top of it, he reported over the weekend as well that the two sides had re-engaged. But he mentioned that back in December, it was described as a staring contest and really wasn't moving anywhere. So it seems like probably triggered in some ways by the news coming out that the MLBPA had rejected Major League Baseball's proposal, which would have involved a universal DH. So while it's still somewhat subject to change, I think we're going to have only DH in the NL. And that's basically what Cruz was waiting on. So he was originally maybe wanted a 2-year deal and probably certainly wanted more than a $13 million salary, which is what he's getting with the Twins. That is pretty much exactly what he made the last 2 years. 14 and 12 last years with the Twins. But his age obviously working against him. He turns 41 in July. But this is a major impact player that the Twins are bringing back to their lineup. He was named the team MVP in both 2019 and 2020. Over the past 2 years, he ranks second among all MLB hitters in OPS, not to mention WOBA, WRC+. Any holistic measure basically of offensive production. Nelson Cruz has been elite at the absolute top of the game. So pretty exciting. David, let's start with you. What are sort of your initial reactions to the Cruz signing, and how are you feeling about the terms and the decision to bring him back? Before you start, I will mention to everyone, I already see some comments popping in. If you're watching on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, you can comment. We can pull them up on the screen. We'd love to hear what all the viewers and fans think about these moves as well. So, David, without further ado.
Yeah, well, I think, Nick, like you mentioned, it's the, our.
Oh, mute. Yeah, sorry, David. I think I accidentally muted you, and then you muted yourself. That was my fault. All right, continue. Oh, you're muted again.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yep, all good.
Perfect. Third time's a charm. But, obviously a big move. Cruz is, arguably as valuable in the clubhouse as he is at the plate. 40-plus homers in 2019, 16 homers in a shortened 2020 season. That's electric. What I found interesting was last night how the Twins had reportedly made an offer to Marcell Ozuna before they signed Cruz, and almost as a bluff tactic or to get that conversation going. But nonetheless, really excited to have Nelson Cruz back at Target Field. I think he is an ageless wonder in the sense that he's 41. No, he doesn't really have any significant value in the field anymore, but he is someone that you can almost count on is still going to have a really good season at the plate in 2021. Even if it's not as great as 2019, he's still going to be a impact player.
Yeah, I think the point, being second among all MLB batters in hitting, I mean, even at age 40, kind of makes the point that there's a long way to fall, that he can still be a high impact player and a quality bat in the middle of this lineup. Obviously, the age is a concern, and we'll talk about that. But anyone who's watched Nelson Cruz and seen him sort of interact with his teammates and coaches and the fans over the past couple of years knows how much he brings to the table. And at these terms, I think it's pretty hard to argue that this is a great deal for the Twins. Matthew, I know you've been sort of on the same page as me of being maybe a little reluctant about bringing back Cruz just because there are certain drawbacks, which we'll discuss. But overall, would you say you're feeling pretty good about this deal at the terms that the Twins got?
Yeah, so as the offseason's gone on, I've sort of done a 180, I guess, on my feelings towards Nelson Cruz. When the offseason started, was more on the train of signing a utility man who could hit well, and then not necessarily needing to have Nelson Cruz back at the DH spot and more cycling guys through. After the Twins signed Andrelton Simmons, to me, the signing of Cruz became a lot more important. I think putting Andrelton Simmons into the lineup, he certainly helps the defense a lot, but I think he does bring down the offense a little bit. He's about a league average, maybe a tick below league average of a hitter, and that just made the need even greater to bring Nelson Cruz, especially when you're losing Eddie Rosario. Likely Kirilloff will provide pretty similar offensive numbers as Rosario, but I think then there's just a lot of question marks if you're putting Andrelton Simmons, who's going to go into the bottom of the order, and then not really replacing Cruz with a middle of the order bat, so to me, I thought bringing back Nelson Cruz at that point was huge, or not necessarily Cruz, just that middle of the order bat that we talk about, which seemed like it was really between Cruz and Ozuna. And then if after that you can get Cruz on a 1 year, $13 million, not even an option or a buyout or anything, I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, what is the worst case scenario of this deal? He's hurt. I mean, I don't think anyone would be super shocked by that for a guy who's turning 41 in July. Or, I mean, his performance would have to drop completely off the table for him not to be at least a productive member of the lineup. His OPS could drop by 100 points from where it was in 2020, and he'd still be a pretty high-quality DH. We've been watching it close up, so it's almost hard to understand just how good he is. But when you see that, second best behind Mike Trout, who is, for my money, the best player in baseball history. That's just an incredible bat. And David, how much do you think he sort of changes the dynamic of this lineup, having him back and probably slotting him right back into that number 3 spot?
I mean, it provides a wealth of consistency without a doubt. I mean, Nelson Cruz has been a hitter that Twins fans and the team can rely on in big moments throughout the regular season the past 2 years. He's been doing it his entire career. And I mean, I think, bringing in what Matthew mentioned, that Simmons is more so known for his work in the field, a career 269 hitter, but still, not somebody that is going to, put up 30 home runs a year. So having Cruz there, where we know almost certainly that he's going to be among the top 10% in offense in the American League, is really, I think, fulfilling. And really puts the Twins in a good place to go back to back in the AL Central.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point to kind of look at it in conjunction with the Andrelton Simmons signing. Here, the Twins have gone out and got one of the top defensive specialists in all of baseball to add to their infield, and then they go and sort of complement that by going and getting one of, if not the best offensive specialist, behind Trout, as we mentioned, and a guy who brings nothing on defense, but that's okay. Sure. So I think whatever, weakness that Andrelton Simmons brings to the lineup, and I think most of us think he has a bit of offensive upside. He's not a disaster as your number 9 hitter by any means. But yeah, bringing Cruz back really infuses that super productivity. And the Twins have got to be feeling pretty good about being well above average offensively, potentially at like 8 out of 9 spots, if not all 9, which is pretty sweet. I see lots of comments coming through here. I'm popping some of them up on the screen, as you can see, and we'll definitely talk about some of them as we go. John says, huge to have Cruz back. Logan says, Cruz and Colomé, let's go. Chad says, I'm so happy with the aggressiveness of Thad and Derek. They have been great for the Twins organization. This was an aggressive, this is a very rapid fire kind of one day after the other. We didn't even have a time to do an episode about Cruz because he signed late last night at 11 when we're all getting ready for bed, if not already in bed. And then by the end of the workday today, by the time Matthew's driving home, they're signed Alex Colomé, who, by the way, apparently is a buddy of Nelson Cruz. And my understanding is that Cruz might have helped with those recruitment efforts a little bit. And we'll talk about Colomé here shortly. Cruz, we all know what he brings to the table. So it's not as much of a shiny new toy. But Matthew, do you think the Twins were going to be in a pretty tough spot here if they were not able to get him? There were other options. Ozuna, as David mentioned, was kind of coming in perhaps just as a bargaining chip. But how would you have felt about this lineup without Cruz in it?
I think it's a major difference just having Cruz in there. He's been the number 3 hitter. He's anchored this team. We saw last year in the postseason, if Cruz wouldn't have been on the roster in the postseason, the team probably, did anybody else drive in a run all postseason? I don't know if they did in the 2-game series against the Astros. So he's huge. He's the anchor. Everything rides off of Cruz in the number 3 spot. So I think it was really important to bring him back, and I'm glad that they did. I think it's a super low risk move. You're not compromising future, years on your cap or anything like that. One interesting thing, and Nick, I know you've talked about this, is just now the Twins are in a spot where Luis Arraez is on the bench and you have your DH spot pretty much spoken for every single game. So it's going to be interesting. I think that stuff is typically overblown where it ends up working itself out within the first 10 games of the season, but still it's going to be a little bit weird having Arraez, who's potentially the favorite, I think, according to most projection systems, to win the batting title, just not having that guaranteed spot with a DH spot open. So we'll see how that plays out.
Absolutely true. And I think the biggest downside, if you want to call it that, like, it's hard to call having Nelson Cruz in the DH spot a downside, because he's as productive, if he's anywhere close to what he's been, he's as productive as a bat as you can possibly get in that spot. But I do think the Twins, more than most teams, would benefit from having the DH spot open, or at least having like a part-time guy there, because like you said, Cruz is going to play. I think they'll probably try to sit him a little more often than they have in the past, just given his age and the need to keep him fresh. And what we're talking about here, which is that DH spot is useful for them, to rotate a guy like Josh Donaldson through, who probably shouldn't be playing third base and on his legs every game with his injury history. Miguel Sano has gotten hurt a lot. Arraez himself, DH would have been a great spot for him to get at bats on a day where everyone else is playing their starting position. So it's going to be interesting to see how Rocco Baldelli navigates that, especially because we know he is a manager who loves to get his guys rest, and the DH spot is so useful for that. But at the end of the day, this is just such a good deal and such a no-brainer, and with everything that he brings and as much as he's loved in the clubhouse and the fact that he can apparently go and recruit a relief pitcher, you got to like it. David, were you surprised that it was a straight-up one-year deal, no option even?
Not really, to be honest. Obviously, we know that towards the beginning of the offseason, Cruz really wanted a 2-year deal. The possibility of that, I think, had multiple things going against it. Obviously, his age, but then also the National League not having the DH this upcoming season, most likely. So I think that 1-year deal is something that, when you weigh the pros and cons, if you're Nelson Cruz, yes, you'd love to have more security if he continues to play with the 2-year deal. But at the same time, you're playing with guys that you've built relationships with. You're playing with guys who they look up to you as a leader, as we've mentioned, not only on the field but off the field. And especially with this Twins team that is going to have some new additions this year, he can certainly be kind of the glue guy in a role that bringing guys together on and off the field.
Yeah, and that's a great point to lead into sort of, I guess, the last thing that is important to touch on with Cruz. John says, great point on Simmons and on Cruz. Agree, he seemed to have a great impact on young guys, allows younger guys to ease in. And Cody says, Sano needed this. There's validity to these points. I think Sano has definitely benefited hugely from having Nelson Cruz as a teammate. And I think the young guys, he sets a great example. He makes them feel comfortable. He gives them confidence. We've seen, I mean, I don't know if it's truly a data evidenced thing, but I mean, it seems like young players are coming in and just getting off to a faster start over these last couple of years. And I'm sure that's a combination of things, but having a guy like Cruz in the clubhouse is a big factor. Matthew, how much do you weigh that beyond just the on-field production, which obviously is amazing?
I personally don't weigh it as much as other people. I think it's a nice benefit to have. I don't think it's worth paying extra money for. I think you pay for you're paying for the production, and Cruz is a $13 million player, and that extra stuff is just bonus and just further reason to bring him back.
Yeah, no, I think I'm probably with you on that. Brandon says having your 2019 and 2020 MVP back for cheaper than we thought we could get him is huge. That is absolutely true. I mean, I think this is, if you could have said at the beginning of the offseason that this was the deal that the Twins were going to be able to bring Nelson Cruz back on, we'd have all been giddy. I don't know if Nelson Cruz would have been quite so giddy. I think that he, frankly, got really screwed over by the way that MLB is handling things. With the lack of clarity on the DH position, he waits out most of the offseason. And, you know, I do think that Cody says, I'm guessing they told him now or never. I'm sure the Twins by this point were starting to put some pressure on and say, look, spring training is 2 weeks away. We got to get our plans in place. You know, if you're going to keep playing hardball at a time where if there's no DH in the NL, I don't know what leverage Cruz really had. There's not a lot of teams that are both contenders, needing a DH, and willing to spend the money that it would take to have outbid the Twins on this. So Cruz, you know, he got stuck in a hard spot, and it's hard to cry for someone who's making $13 million this year. But as good of a player as he is, he probably would have liked to get a little more. But I guess the Twins, according to Dan Hayes, another scoop from Hayes, who's been scooping everything lately, one of the perks that the Twins used to draw back Nelson Cruz was hiring his personal chef in the kitchen. So you sprinkle in little things like that, and I guess that helps get it done. Speaking of what helps get it done, apparently Cruz helped get it done with the other big signing of the past couple days, former White Sox closer Alex Colomé. Came through today, the news that the Twins have picked him up to add to the back of their bullpen on a one-year deal worth $5 million. There's a 2022 option worth $1.25 million on that worth $5.5 million, but with a $1.25 million buyout. So the total guaranteed amount here, $6.25 for a player who's been phenomenal throughout his career. I mean, a career 2.95 ERA, 1.17 WHIP, posted a 0.81 ERA, and went 12 for 13 in save chances for the White Sox during the 60-game season. You know, looking at his StatCast, which I bring up on screen here for 2020, you see a couple things. Now, you know, what you see here is, for one, he throws two pitches. He throws a cutter, which he throws most of the time, 71% of the time he threw it in 2020, and a fastball, and a straight fastball. Both those pitches a little below the league average in terms of velocity, and you can see over there he's in the 21st percentile for fastball velocity, 20th percentile for fastball spin. Those maybe don't impress you that much or jump out, and I guess as a result, 16% for K percentage. But I mean, look at all the rest of his measures here. Those things in the red and the dark red are on the, you know, above average to elite era. 95th percentile for barrel percentage. Guys could not square him up. And he did miss some bats. He's in the 77th percentile for whiff percentage. As you look at, I wanted to also take a look. Well, first of all, I'll just, as I bring this up, Matthew, what are your sort of initial thoughts on Alex Colomé and how he fits for the Twins?
Yeah, I think it's just another really solid signing, another smart deal. I think if we know anything about this front office, we talk about it time and time again, they're going to sign the guys that have value. They knew, looking at the reliever market, that if we wait this out, there's going to be value down the road, and getting a guy like Colomé for a one-year deal, just $5 million this year, 6.25 guaranteed. I think that's just straight value right there. He wasn't definitely the best reliever on the market. He doesn't blow guys away. He doesn't miss bats, but he's just super consistent and super effective. Every single season, his ERA has been under 4. He's never thrown an ERA under 4. He's been in the 2 to 3 ERA range. Last year, he is down to 0.81. He just gets it done. He's the type of guy who he doesn't throw gas. He doesn't miss bats, and you expect him that he's probably going to give up runs, and he just never does. So I think I just starting the offseason wasn't super excited on him just because he doesn't have – I just enjoy velocity and strikeouts and things like that. And he doesn't have those numbers, and you doubt it and keep saying, well, this is probably the year that it goes sideways, and it just never does. So I think smart signing, effective pitcher, reliable. I think you can only be excited about it.
Yeah. As I mentioned, whatever you're watching on, if you're watching the show here on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, please feel free to comment, share your thoughts on Alex Colomé or Nelson Cruz. We want to hear what you guys think, how you're feeling about these new signings. You said it, Matthew. I mean, I think consistent and effective are the words. I pulled up his baseball reference page here on the screen. And, I think the things that pop out at you, an all-star once back in 2016, that was his first season as a full-time reliever and closer in Tampa Bay. Obviously, in his entire career, he's never had an ERA over 4 or even over 3.94. And since moving to the bullpen full-time, never above 3.24. So an extremely consistent, as you mentioned, record of production. He's been a closer. You look in the save column, he's been a full-time closer for the majority of this time. He was the closer for the White Sox. As I mentioned, he saved 12 out of 13 chances, only gave up 2 earned runs in the entire season last year. The one thing that I know people might be a little iffy about is, as Matthew mentioned, the strikeout rate. Not that glamorous, I guess, especially in today's era of huge strikeout rates out of the bullpen everywhere. And last year with the White Sox, just a 6.4 K per 9 average. And that's probably why his market was not, what it might have been for a guy who has these kind of numbers and this kind of consistency. But the Twins, I believe, are very well positioned to succeed with a pitcher like that because they went and got Andrelton Simmons, moved Jorge Polanco to second, where I think he's going to be a lot more effective. Hopefully they'll have Buxton healthy in center field. This is maybe the best defensive team in the major leagues with 2 of the better defenders at key positions in recent major league history. So I'm sure that was one thing that was attractive to Colomé on a 1-year guarantee. And it's something that really stands out to me as a pretty good thing. David, do you agree? Do you feel maybe a little better about the low strikeout rate, knowing that, he put up a 0.81 ERA with that strikeout rate for the White Sox, who aren't that great defensively. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I am 100% okay with that low strikeout rate. Not only do the Twins have just a stellar infield this upcoming season, which is going to complement that well, but Colomé is somebody who brings versatility to the bullpen. I mean, when is the last time that the Twins had a relief pitcher that threw a cutter? You'd have to dig a little bit, or I should say a good cutter, which he does. One nice thing with having Colomé there is that he's a late inning guy, and him and Taylor Rogers, Rocco Baldelli obviously does not like to use the word closer, but there's an opportunity there, even if Colomé is the premier or is like the closer for most games. There's an opportunity for a platoon there. Rogers is a fastball slider pitcher. Colomé obviously is a cutter heavy pitcher. One's a righty, one is a lefty. And it's something where, you mentioned, Nick, that Colomé has been a closer for the majority of his career, and he absolutely has, but he also has experience as a setup man. He held 30 leads, I believe, for Seattle when he spent a season with the Mariners. And as you mentioned, he's stellar in the closer role, was tied with Taylor Rogers for 4th most saves in the American League in 2019 with the White Sox. So I think when you're looking at the Twins right now, this move in the bullpen, it's about as good of a move as you can make. and it makes it a little bit sweeter that they took him from the team that is going to be competing against the Twins for the division title.
Yeah, that's a great point. You just inspired me to pull up his career splits here, because that's an interesting point about the platoon possibility. And actually, I didn't realize this, but Alex Colomé has a reverse career split. He has held right-handers to a 659 OPS in his career. He's held left-handers to a 607 OPS. That's like what you expect out of a lefty specialist. That's very impressive, and that's the kind of thing that you see sometimes out of guys who specialize in the cutter. And speaking of that cutter, that thing is nasty. That is a great pitch. I know I mentioned on Twitter just a little bit ago, we mentioned earlier that he threw that thing 71% of the time in 2020, and with that particular pitch, he held opponents to a 154, 193, 200 line. That's 154 average, 193 OBP, 200 slugging. And in 2019, the full season, lest you think that's a short season fluke, a 174 average, 243 OBP, and 299 slugging. That's a dominant pitch that he can rely on very, very heavily and borderline exclusively, as he's kind of been trending over these past couple years. There is at least one closer in Major League history who has had a pretty good cutter and relied on it pretty much exclusively and done pretty okay with it. Now, Matthew, I'm sure you're probably not ready for the Mariano Rivera comparison, but when you look at sort of the recipe that Colomé has used for success, do you feel pretty comfortable with him just continuing to lean hard on that cutter, pitching to contact to some extent, but getting that weak contact? I mean, despite the low K rate and the high contact last year, he gave up 0 home runs. And as we mentioned, he shut a 0.81 ERA.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other key part of that is just those are the types of guys that you expect to age well. The guys who just throw one pitch, they throw it really well. They don't rely on high velocity. They don't rely on, their strength and their youth in order to get guys out. He's, again, the market of consistency. He does one thing, he does it really well, and it's good enough, and he doesn't need to change that. We'll see if the Twins make any tweaks to him. I don't know necessarily why they would, but you can count on Alex Colomé. He's going to use his cutter. He's going to do it well. There's going to be broken bats, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a similar situation with Jay Happ. They're not looking to reinvent this guy. They see that he was in a good place. He had a pitch mix that was working for him already. So I think they're just going to try to encourage him to keep doing that. I'm sure, Wes Johnson and the brain trust in the front office there might have a few small ideas, but this is a guy who's had a ton of success with the way he's done it. And I think it is important to bring in a guy who was extremely successful in 2020, because elsewhere at the back end of that bullpen, they're relying a little bit on some rebounds and some guys kind of getting right. Of course, Taylor Rogers had a bit of a tough year in 2020, and Hansel Robles, who was their only previous free agent signing in the bullpen, is coming off a really tough year with the Angels. He posted a 10+ ERA. So here you have a guy who is riding some momentum, and as we said, he's just been extremely consistent. He has never not been good. So you got to be feeling pretty comfortable about him at least being able to fill some sort of role in the back end of that bullpen. Now, as to what role that's going to be is an interesting question. Bob Nightingale of USA Today, who initially broke the news with this tweet at 3:55 today that the Twins are expected to sign Alex Colomé to be their closer. Now, my belief, and based on everything I know, is that the closer part is a little bit of editorializing / obliviousness. And Bob Nightingale, I'll give him credit for putting this news out, but he continues to prove himself to not be the most trusted or reliable source of information. David, what are your thoughts on that concept? I mean, Rocco Baldelli has already said straight up this offseason to the press that he is not going to use a designated closer. I think it's extremely fair to expect that Rogers will get some chances and probably Robles will get some chances. One thing that I noticed when they signed him was that all of his incentives in his contract were based on games finished. So you'd think they would give him some chance to hit some of those. What kind of role are you envisioning for Colomé, David, in the back of the bullpen, and how would you like to see him used?
Well, what I would like to see, Nick, is right away to mix and match a little bit. Now with the addition of Colomé, you have that versatility in that you've got Rogers, who has been in that closer role. You've got obviously Colomé, who has, but you also have guys like Robles who fit that closer position. And you've got Tyler Duffy, who could be a solid setup man. And I think that once we get a third of the way through the season, we're going to see some consistency there, with perhaps going in the order of Duffy, Rogers, Colomé. But at the same time, I love the approach that Rocco Baldelli is taking. He doesn't, obviously the game of baseball isn't as traditional with the closer role as it used to be, and the Twins really embody that in the sense that this team has got versatility. And if you are able to, have teams thinking, who are the Twins going to put out there in the eighth? Who are they going to put out there in the ninth? That's a weapon. That's something that they can play to their strength. That's not to say that I don't think that Colomé will be that primary guy for save opportunities, because I think once we get into the thick of the season, he will be. But Taylor Rogers has shown us that even though that this year is going to be a rebound, he can be a pretty darn effective closer too. So versatility is a beautiful thing, and I think that Baldelli and the Twins staff is going to use that to their advantage.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and I think that the presence of the option in that it's a mutual option, so the Twins and Colomé would both have a chance to decline it. But the Twins, if they decline it, will pay $1.25 million, which is a pretty large buyout for a $5 million contract. That's a quarter of his salary this year. So I think he's in a position where, maybe they're setting him up to not be in that full-time closer role, which would be annoying to him if he was just going back into the market and wants to have those saves, to the extent that teams care about that. I don't really know if it's as big of a deal anymore. But now it's like he doesn't have to worry that much about his role or if he's compiling saves, because if he pitches well and effectively in the role the Twins signed him to, they're going to bring him back for $5.5 million next year. And if they want to part ways, I mean, he's still going to get $1 million, and $250,000. So I mean, that's not bad. I think it's a pretty good contract for him, and I like it for the Twins. Matthew, how do you sort of feel like the back end of the bullpen? They've got Rogers, they've got Colomé, they've got Robles, and they've got Duffy. I mean, those are 4 high-quality relievers, most of whom have a lot of closing experience. Guys like Colomé have pitched on contenders. They pitched on White Sox, the Rays. Are you feeling pretty good, or do you feel like they definitely need at least one more kind of high-impact addition?
I still think they need another high-impact addition. I'm not as high on Robles as everybody else. I think he has a high ceiling, but we've seen what his floor is last year, which is an ERA over 10. So I'm not necessarily penciling him in as a back end of the bullpen type guy. I think I have confidence in Rogers, Duffy, and Colomé now. I think you still really, you lost Tyler Clippard, you lost Sergio Romo, you lost Trevor May, you lost Matt Whistler. That's a lot of right-handed pitchers who the Twins counted on in big spots last season, and I think Colomé certainly replaces one of them. I don't know that I would just pencil in Robles as replacing one of them. You're definitely not replacing the swing and misses that you got from both Whistler and Trevor May. So I still think that it would be nice to sign a fireball type, strikeout type pitcher. That move could potentially come at the deadline. I think there's always moves to be made later. You don't need to make your team in the winter. You can make your team in the summer and make trades, as things happen. So I don't think it's necessarily needs to happen right now, but I don't necessarily have a ton of confidence that this can be a lights out bullpen. I still think the bullpen was better last season than it's penciled in to be this season. So I still think Tyler Clippard is just the most slam dunk signing, make it happen type deal, and still don't know why that's not done, but we'll see what happens.
It still might. I mean, Tyler Clippard is most likely going to be in a large group of guys looking for jobs here at the very end of the offseason, because there's still a lot of free agent relievers. Now, on the high end of that, perhaps the only guy who's still on the market who was ahead of Alex Colomé, Trevor Rosenthal. I see Jason asks, how much is Trevor Rosenthal asking for? Any chance they could add him to the mix as a hard thrower? Kind of like Matthew was just suggesting that maybe they could still stand to add. I loved Trevor Rosenthal as an option. He was a former elite closer, had a great bounce back after some rough times and injuries. And he is the big name left on that market. My understanding is that the Twins I think he wants a high salary at the very least, and quite probably a multi-year deal. He can probably get that from someone. I just don't know if the Twins are going to go there. David, do you think there's any chance that the Twins will make another big splash in the bullpen, or do you expect maybe more of that Tyler Clippard in the $2 to $3 million range?
Yeah, well, I agree. I would love to see Trevor Rosenthal, but I just, I try to be a realist in life, and I do not think it's going to happen. I think that his price tag is too high. Obviously, he is someone that would improve this bullpen immensely. But with the price tag and the wanting a multi-year deal, don't think it's going to happen. I agree with Matthew that re-signing Tyler Clippard for a couple million would be a wonderful move. Obviously, as he mentioned, lost a lot of right-handers, and I believe actually as well. Zach Littell also signed today. But I think that someone like Clippard, who has really been, we mentioned consistency earlier, Tyler Clippard is consistent. And that I'd say the Twins bullpen right now on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, is at a 6 or a 6.5. I think Clippard bumps it up to an 8. I think that addition is something they can make happen. And it would be a worthwhile use of the remaining offseason money that they have.
Yeah, so as we kind of move into the latter part of this discussion, we've talked about how we feel about Cruz and Colomé. I see there's a lot of questions in the comments wondering about what else the Twins might do. So taking what David just said as a segue, let's talk a little bit about that. I've pulled up on the screen here a up-to-date look at the Twins roster and payroll here. So on the left side, you can see their position players, rotation up on the upper right, and the bullpen, which now features Colomé and his $5 million salary in the lower right. So this layout here does not account for Kenta Maeda's contract incentives, which are based on starting games. As long as he's healthy, he's probably going to hit quite a few of those. So the $3 million salary you see there is more likely to probably be 10 to 12 million. So the true payroll number here is probably about 130, which is pretty close to where they were last year, and I think beyond what some of us expected them to spend this year. I think if they would have scaled back 10% from where they were in 2020, which would have been understandable enough given the economic situation and uncertainty, that would have put them around the 125 mark. So they've shown that they're willing to spend. They made a move here to get a quality player. So let's talk a little bit about what else they might do. There are still needs as you look at this roster, especially in the bullpen still. I mean, they've got Waddell or Ian Jabot maybe filling out that last spot in the bullpen. Cody Stashak, who wasn't with them for a lot of last year. Maybe you want a little more sort of reliability and established dependability in that last spot in the bullpen. They could maybe use another bench bat, although I think that bench looks pretty good, honestly, with Cruz added to the mix. They've got Arias now in the utility spot, Cave or maybe Lamont Wade penciled into the fourth outfielder spot, possibly a guy like Brent Rooker as a fifth outfielder / DH first baseman. And then, of course, Ryan Jeffers backing up Garver or splitting time with Garver at catcher. Dobnak still in that fifth starter spot. I think they probably like to get, someone to at least compete with him for that job. So, Matthew, as you look at the Twins roster as it currently stands, how comfortable would you be with this being the roster they take forward into the season? And what would you kind of do within, semi-realistic? I mean, even if maybe they'll push it up to 140. What would you like to see them do, and what area would you like to see them address before the start of the season here?
Yeah, so I think if this was the roster that we went into the season with and we were done making moves, the Twins didn't make any more moves, I think it would be a B- type off season. I think you filled the needs that you needed to in order to come back into the season with a squad that can compete with the White Sox for the Central. I think you checked those boxes that you needed. You didn't necessarily do anything additional to put yourself over the top. You brought Cruz back. That's not really upgrading your team. You're putting in Colomé for the Trevor May, Matt Whistler type spot, which might be a slight upgrade, but not a huge upgrade. Then obviously your upgrade there is the Andrelton Simmons spot at the shortstop, which is huge, but is it enough to be a World Series contending team? I don't think yet. So I think there still needs to be one more impact move that could come now. It could be, I think it's probably a starting pitcher. I don't think you can sign a reliever, but I don't know that you're going to get a ton of impact there. I think the starting pitcher spot is where the impact would come from. So I think that could be now. It could be a James Paxton on a 1-year, $13 million contract, something like that. Or you could wait. You could roll this into the season and then make a trade. You could hope that the Reds tank and you can get a Luis Castillo. You could try to get one of the pitchers from Colorado if that team starts tanking. I think there's still a lot of options. I think we don't necessarily need to worry about that before the season starts. If they want to do that via free agency, there's Jake Odorizzi still, James Paxton. But otherwise, I think it's a solid B off season. If they can bring back a Tyler Clippard and come into the season that way, I'm not blown away and don't know that they really upped their chances to win the World Series from this time last season. But they did enough.
Yeah, I mean, if they could go and get a James Paxton and a Jake Odorizzi to round out that rotation, move Dobnak to that last bullpen spot, I mean, that would be a slam dunk, and I would be ecstatic about that. But that would require them most likely to go above where they were in payroll or projected to be in 2020. So are they willing to do that is the question. How much more are they willing to spend? David, as you look at the left side of our layout here with the position player side, are you feeling pretty good with that as the finalized version of the position players on the roster?
I do. Yeah, I think that, agreeing with Matthew, I think, if there's anything else that needs to be spent, it needs to go towards pitching and primarily starting pitching. But I think that when you look at that left side of the chart there, especially with the addition of Andrelton Simmons, having Luis Arraez as your top utility man, they're going to use him a little bit different than perhaps they used Marwin Gonzalez and Ere Adrianza last year, in the sense that Luis Arraez is young, he's extremely talented, and they're going to try to get him a ton of at-bats. A product of that, meaning that whoever that second utility guy is, isn't necessarily going to get a whole lot of time. So I'd love to see him stick with maybe a Travis Blankenhorn, instead of signing Marwin Gonzalez again, who would probably be a bit more expensive. So I think on that side of things are done because you've got stellar defense, but at the same time, with Cruz coming back, no, you don't necessarily improve that offense from last year, but at the same time, you sustain it. And Simmons is someone who, by no means is he going to be a 2, 3, 4 hitter, but he is somebody who, if the Twins put him at the 8 or the 9 spot, he is probably going to be above the league average at the plate for those spots, I think. So I would say, continue with maybe bringing up Blankenhorn for that second utility man, but Arraez is going to get a lot of time as that first utility guy. So the money right now, in my opinion, should absolutely go towards a Jake Odorizzi or a James Paxton.
So in your opinion, the rotation is definitely the bigger need than the bullpen among the remaining sort of pitching staff areas.
Yes. Yeah, I would say that agreeing with Matthew in the sense that, it would be great if they could sign a big name reliever like Rosenthal or even a Clippard. But at the same time, the Twins have the opportunity, if they do sign a Paxton or if they re-sign Odorizzi, to have one of the strongest starting rotations that they've probably had since the Johan Santana days, since the 1991 team with Scott Erickson, Jack Morris, and Kevin Tapani. Certainly their top 3 was rock solid last year. It's got the potential to do that again, but that 4 and 5 role are not only important in the regular season, but barring injuries and overuse, things like that, it's really nice if you can have 2 guys who are willing to who can step up in the postseason too.
Yeah, I mean, you try to find a precedent or something to compare this rotation to in Twins history, and of course, you go back to the Johan Santana days, and of course, they're not going to have a pitcher of Johan's caliber in this rotation. He is one of the greatest pitchers of modern baseball history. But during those times, they pretty much always had, at least one blatantly bad pitcher at the bottom of the rotation. That was always the frustrating thing about the Twins, is that they would put together these sort of incomplete rosters that were very top heavy. You'd have Joe Mauer and Justin Morneau in the lineup, and then you'd have Nick Punto and Adam Everett or something, So that's what I love about the way that this team has been built. I see Colin says, I love this front office so much. I really like the way they go about their business and build a complete team. The Twins have some potential MVP caliber players, but more importantly, they just don't have giant weaknesses. You could look maybe at the bottom of that bullpen right now, and that's why perhaps we would like to see them add one or two more sort of established arms. I know everyone's saying, why is Tyler Clippard not signed already? I think there's a pretty good chance they'll sign him right before spring training when he doesn't really have an offer better than $2 or $3 million. That's pretty easy to do. Silk says, might stretch the payroll a bit, but I would like to see them sign Clippard plus a starter. Odo or Paxton are probably a little expensive with the payroll they have now, but maybe Taijuan Walker. I personally think something like that is the most realistic scenario. I could see them getting like one more reliever like Clippard at that $2 to $3 million range, and then a fairly cheap starter, maybe even someone not at the level of Walker, who was pretty young and had a good rebound last year. But there's a lot of pretty interesting names out there. The Twins went and saw Jake Arrieta pitch last week, I believe, a former Cy Young winner who's been kind of down, but I like the idea of, I think they're in a good position to take a risk on someone like that for a rebound, because, if it doesn't work out and your fallback is Randy Dobnak, that's not too bad at all. I mean, Dobnak's a very good fifth starter. But of course, the importance of rotation depth has been proven time and time again, especially over a 162 game season. There's little question that the Twins are going to need, probably 7 to 10 starters at least in 2021. So Matthew, how do you feel sort of about the rotation depth beyond those 5, and how important do you think it is to bring in some arms to compete with Dobnak at least, and maybe give you some of that potential depth?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to go about it. There's one way where you just sign your starter now, where you push Dobnak into the long relief spot, and then you could bring him into the rotation with injuries. You sign your, like we were saying, your Jake Odorizzi, your James Paxton, even if it's a higher, like a Julio Teheran type guy. And you could go about it that way. And I just, as I'm talking about, I sort of like this way of just rolling with this into the season. And there's always pitchers that are available for trade as the season goes on. I think we saw that the postseason likely isn't going to be expanded. I think that means that more names are going to be on the market. There's going to be less teams that have a shot at making the postseason, more names available in trade. If you wait it out and you round out this rotation with a Luis Castillo halfway through the season, then that's when you start to have a ALCS contending, World Series contending team, where signing a Jake Odorizzi or James Paxton, I think they have upside, but we've also seen what the downside is, which is they don't play because they get injured, and you just can't quite count on that. So I think right now that's my preference, is just sign a guy to compete with Dobnak. You sign a Jose Urena type guy just to push him, see what happens. See if he can make that 5th spot, and if not, you roll with the 5-man rotation with Dobnak, and you finish out forming your team in the summer.
That's a good point, having sort of the flexibility to make additions in season. I mean, this is a very respectable roster to take into the season, and something we haven't really mentioned yet is that the Twins have made some pretty big additions in the past few weeks, especially, and they've done it without trading any of their prospects away. They've got a very deep well of prospects. They've got quality young players, sort of deep into their system. And we've seen with some of the other trades that have happened in major leagues this year, you don't necessarily have to give up your top elite prospects to get a good player. That might be even more the case if they're trying to get someone in the middle of the season, someone who's got a contract running out. So if they're willing to take on some more payroll, especially if they find themselves in contention and with a need, that could be a good opportunity. MN Sports Center says, do you guys think Taijuan Walker is a potential option? He was just brought up by Silk just a bit ago. And yeah, I think my understanding is that the Twins were quite close to signing Taijuan Walker last offseason. Kind of fell through. This is not real information, but my sort of read on the situation was that they wanted to sign him to a minor league deal like they did with Jhoulys Chacin. And he ended up getting that big league deal, I think, with Seattle. So I think absolutely there's a relationship there, and he'd be a good pick, especially because he's still only like 28 years old and has some upside. But as I mentioned, there's quite a few names that are going to be left that are kind of intriguing for that fifth rotation spot. Speaking of which, I think a good way to kind of wrap up this conversation is to run with Greg's question here. Who would each of you guys pick for a last starter? So, sadly, it's probably not going to be Trevor Bauer. So if we're trying to stay somewhat in the realm of realism, David, if the Twins were to sign another pitcher to compete with Dobnak or even maybe supplant him and put him in the long relief role, which as Seth points out, that is a role that still kind of needs to be filled. He said, who's the long reliever? Thorpe, Smeltzer? Yeah, probably one of those guys. In the bullpen picture we have here, I included Waddell in the last spot just because I assume that they'll probably want to carry him or Jabot because they took these players off waivers and gave them 40-man roster spots. I'm guessing at least one of them they'll want to take a look at. But they'll probably have someone in the bullpen in some capacity that's able to pitch multiple innings. So, David, who's a guy that you would like to see the Twins sign, and maybe they could start with Dobnak in that long reliever spot?
Yeah, well, I think if that is the situation, like I said earlier, Paxton or Odorizzi would be great. But at the same point, Matthew brought up a wonderful point in the sense, or not a wonderful point, but the fact that they both have struggled with injuries. So that's something where, in a perfect world, I would love to see if the Twins aren't able to sign a high-level reliever, and if they don't, or not a reliever, a high-level starter, and they don't sign Taijuan Walker, starting with Dobnak in that 5 spot, and then as the season goes on, that potential trade opportunity, like Matthew mentioned, trading for a Reds pitcher, a Rockies pitcher, a Luis Castillo, somebody who, if the Twins are, this roster that we have right now it's a good team. I think right now, I believe that this is a team on paper that can win the Central, and that is slightly better than the White Sox because there are no big holes. Seth just brought up the long reliever, and that certainly isn't a role where the Twins, I don't think, have a strength right now. But it is, this team is consistent. It's rock solid, and there are no big holes, whereas we do see that with the White Sox, where there's less depth. So I would love, Randy Dobnak right now, but would love to see Jay Happ get there in the middle of the season with them signing a Luis Castillo or somebody similar to him.
Ooh, okay, so you like the trade approach. Sealk mentions that what really worries him about the wait and trade later approach is that you're one injury away from having to count on Thorpe or Smeltzer. I would like to have Dobnak as a backup in this scenario, and that's kind of what the Twins did last offseason. And they at least had a situation set up with Pineda joining the team and Rich Hill coming back from his injury rehabilitation, that they had reinforcements set up. And that is sort of what's a miss right now. I think they've got some good prospects in Yohan Duran and Jordan Balazovic, who are good prospects, but we haven't seen them really on the mound for a whole year. So I do think I'd like to see at least one other starter added. Matthew, well, actually, I see Tom here says Mike Foltynewicz. Folty, good old Folty. I know the Twins, I think, checked him out in a workout recently. And Caden also says, don't forget about Folty. Matthew, who do you like? Who would be your top starting pitcher target to fill that last spot in the rotation?
Yeah, I would want to go either you form your team now, you go big, you go for Odorizzi or Paxton, or you sign, like to Sealk's point, you sign sort of a guy who can be a placeholder, who can be your, your Rich Hill type, or, to fill that number 5 spot to compete with Dobnak and to be there. So then Dobnak is your fallback option. So somebody's going to be left signing for, $2 to $3 million. Is that a Mike Fiers? Is that a Anibal Sanchez? Is that a Brad Peacock? Somebody like that to fill the number 5 spot. And then, you just see how the season goes. You see if a Yohan Duran comes up and takes that spot. You see if Dobnak pitches a lot better with a great infield defense. You see if you can make a trade for one of the big starters. I would rather just either sign a big name now or leave yourself open to be flexible to sign or to trade for somebody or to call somebody up to fill that spot. am not so crazy about, putting in an Arrieta type pitcher there or a Porcello where you're kind of just stuck with a fifth pitcher there who's taking up a roster spot and something like that. So I think those would be my options. My preference would be to just roll with what we have and bring in a, $2 million, $3 million starter.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable and probably a pretty realistic expectation of what will happen. I myself do like the idea of bringing in an Arrieta. Now, I have no intel. I didn't see him pitch or anything in his workout, and it wouldn't really matter if I did. I'm like, oh, wow, he threw some pitches. But, whoever the Twins like, basically, I mean, whoever they kind of see something in that they can do with, they've had a good knack for that. I thought that the Homer Bailey signing, even though we didn't really get to see him much last year, was a smart signing with good reasoning behind it. We saw them bring in Anibal Sanchez, and even though he didn't stick with the team in spring training, he had a great year. So obviously they were on the right track. So, whoever the Twins like, even if it's got a guy with some risk, I kind of liked Carlos Rodon before the White Sox went and brought him back, because I just think, your fallback option, if it's Dobnak, is not bad. But, to the point made by Seelk, it would be nice to have some depth. It'd be nice to have Dobnak as a clear sort of fallback option, because Thorpe is not as intriguing right now as a fallback option in the rotation as he was a year ago. He was terrible. I mean, he looked awful in 2020. And even Dobnak, frankly, has sort of lost his luster that he had a year ago with the big drop off in the second half. So I would like to see the Twins make another move in the rotation, and it seems like most people would as well. Austin says Ozuna out of the Twins picture. I think so. I mean, Matthew, I know you did a free agent showdown between Ozuna and Cruz a while back, and sort of felt that Cruz was the better fit. So I'm sure you're happy with that signing from that perspective. Do you think there's any scenario where Ozuna's price drops and the Twins bring him in to play some sort of left field DH hybrid?
Trust me, you don't want to see Marcell Ozuna in left field. It's not pretty. I was looking up some of his defense and videos and numbers just to see about exactly what Austin's talking about, and it is not pretty.
Yeah, that would sort of undo all the great defensive work you've done to have a DH running around or clanking around out there in left field. So one last thing I want to mention, everyone, we would have normally had our famous Twins Daily Winter Meltdown event this past Saturday, where we would all be getting together and talking about the moves that have been made, the moves that are hopefully going to be made the season ahead. Weren't able to do it this offseason for obvious reasons, but you can still get one of our lovely signature pint glasses. So we can still kind of raise a glass and cheers. I'm almost done with my little happy hour beer that I'm drinking in my 2019 edition here. These are great pint glasses. They're fun collector's items. And if you order one at twinsdaily.com, you pay $20. You'll get it mailed to you, and all profits and proceeds on that will go to a nonprofit for local hospitality industry workers impacted by the pandemic. A very great and worthy cause. So I recommend going and checking that out, and make sure you come by and check out the great work from Matthew Taylor and David Youngs. Follow Matthew on Twitter at Matthew Taylor MN, and David at DYoungs15. Gentlemen, as we close out here, any sort of final thoughts? Matthew, what's your overall vibe and sort of excitement level with these two moves coming in rapid succession, and how much better are you feeling about the Twins than you did on Sunday?
Yeah, I think my final thought is just now, hopefully we know going into next season that let's just be patient with this front office. They're going to take time. It's been 2 years in a row now where there's been some panic across Twins territory, and the front office has waited and been patient and made the right move. So let's just be patient and trust in this front office. I think there's lots of reasons to be excited about this season. I think I'm extra excited just for the rivalry with the White Sox. I think it's going to be extremely close, fun AL Central race. I'm very excited that there is most likely not going to be expanded playoffs. It's just going to make each game even more exciting and important. And I saw somebody tweet that there's going to be Minnesota Twins baseball games played this month, and it sort of blew my mind that
I think that was Nash, yeah.
Yeah, we're pretty much here. It's crazy, but we're here.
It really is. I mean, yeah, spring training is now less than 2 weeks away. Baseball is back, folks, and the Twins are loading up and getting ready for this season. I am really excited for the Twins White Sox rivalry this season. it was fun rooting against Cleveland or whatever, or Detroit for all those years. They were sort of the head honchos, but the Twins-White Sox rivalry feels right to me. And that is, the White Sox fans are so annoying and they're so fun to banter with. And these teams are pretty evenly matched, I think. I do think that the Twins have a bit of an edge because they have far better depth, which we've seen how important that is over a 162-game season. But especially the closer dynamic is kind of fun. The White Sox went and signed a mega deal, a former Twins pitcher in Liam Hendricks. Of course, he's not anymore the same pitcher we knew him as here, but he's going to be their closer replacing Alex Colomé, who is now with the Twins. And, Hendricks is clearly a way better pitcher than Colomé, but you can't get better results than Colomé got last year. I mean, we talked about his numbers earlier, 0.81 ERA, 12 out of 13 save conversions. So at best, they're going to stay steady in the ninth inning. And I think that Tony La Russa, being an old school, weathered, crappy manager, will probably use him in a very traditional, stringent closer capacity in the ninth, whereas Rocco Baldelli is frankly just a more enlightened baseball manager who I think will be able to use his relievers more effectively and get more out of a guy like Alex Colomé by not pigeonholing him in any sort of role. So that's going to be fun. David, as we sign off, how about you? What is your excitement level about the Twins now after these two moves?
Well, I can tell you what, I am really excited. The light is at the end of the tunnel. Baseball is near. Saw today that the St. Paul Saints are offering mini packages for games this summer, and just as well as, it sounds like the Twins are going to allow some fans at spring training. So obviously hoping that we can make it through this pandemic. Everybody stays safe, continues to be smart. But at the end of the day, it's just great to see, like you mentioned, this Twins-White Sox rivalry is wonderful. It's both teams have gained some national traction, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse this offseason, more so on the worse on the White Sox side. But it is something that this is a Twins team that is just really, really solid. There are no big holes. There's, the Twins went from 2019 having one of the marquee offenses in baseball history to 2021, 2 years later now, where the Minnesota Twins may have one of the best defenses in recent decades. And that is really exciting. And I think it's going to provide a new lens for fans to watch the game through. We're going to be able to see the importance that defense has. It's having a guy like Andrelton Simmons makes a difference. Those runs saved are really important. Even if the Twins don't have 2, 3, 4 strikeout heavy pitchers, that's what the defense is there for. And when you've got a pretty darn good one, good things happen. So I'm feeling optimistic and really looking forward to spring training in the next couple of weeks.
I'm with you, man. So obviously the big objective for the Twins this year, in addition to capturing a third straight AL Central title, is getting that elusive postseason win. Why did the Twins lose in the playoffs last year? Well, they couldn't hit or score runs, but now they've brought back the one guy who did hit for them in Nelson Cruz. So you got to be feeling a little better about that. They pitched really well, and they're bringing back all of their playoff starters, and they've also got Jay Happ, who is a well-traveled pitcher with playoff experience. And now they've brought in Alex Colomé, a relief pitcher with plenty of experience on contending teams. So I think they've made some moves that are encouraging in that regard as well. And we're not going to have to wait too long to see it all play out on the field because, as mentioned, a couple weeks here from spring training, things are starting to come together, and we're starting to feel pretty excited about the Minnesota Twins. So thank you very much for everyone who has joined us for this stream. It was an unannounced stream that just kind of popped up because we had to talk about this stuff, but a big crowd here and a lot of great comments from everyone. So thank you all who tuned in. If you came in late and missed some of the discussion and you want to catch it all, you can always we'll have a post on twinsdaily.com with the full video embedded. It'll be on our YouTube channel. And I can't stress this enough, folks, the podcast channel, look for the Twins Daily Podcast on Spotify or Apple or Libsyn or wherever you find it. We put these podcasts up. You'll find the audio form of this discussion basically as soon as we're done here. It is a free podcast with no ads, and we react to this stuff as quick as we can. So subscribe to that, and you'll never miss an episode. So thank you very much, Matthew and David, for joining on short notice. Everyone, please come by Twins Daily, read their excellent work, as well as all of our other great writers. And thank you, everyone. Alex Colomé and Nelson Cruz, Minnesota Twins, and we're almost ready for the season. So go Twins.
Night.
Win Twins.